In the oil fields of western Pennsylvania, they called it soup. Not because it looked like soup or smelled like it. They called it that because if you said the real word too loud near a well site, men would back away from you. The real word was nitroglycerin. And between 1866 and 1900, a small army of men made their living hauling it across rutted backroads in spring wagons with the cans strapped into a padded box right under their seat. One bump too many and there was nothing left. Not the wagon, not the horse, not the man. As John McLaurin put it in 1896, the unlucky handler might as well have his will written and a cigar box ordered to hold the fragments his weeping relatives could pick from the surrounding district. This is the story of the nitro haulers, the shooters, the moonlighters, and the job so dangerous that no insurance company in America would write a policy on your life. America's first oil boom started with a single well on Oil Creek near Titusville, Pennsylvania, drilled by Edwin Drake on August 27, 1859. Within months, the Creek Valley was jammed with derricks, speculators, and mud. But oil wells had a problem nobody advertised. They clogged. Paraffin wax built up inside the bore. The flow slowed, then stopped. Men tried pouring boiling water down the shaft. They tried benzene. Nothing worked well enough. Then, a Civil War veteran named Edward Roberts had an idea. Lieutenant Colonel Roberts had watched Confederate artillery shells strike a narrow mill race during the Battle of Fredericksburg in December 1862. He noticed the explosions directed their force downward through the water, cratering the bottom instead of scattering sideways. After the war, he carried that observation to the Pennsylvania oil fields. On January 21, 1865, Roberts lowered an iron shell packed with 8 pounds of black powder into the Ladies' Well on Oil Creek and detonated it at a depth of 465 feet. The well surged back to life. Black powder worked, but it was slow. It required deep holes, and it left thick smoke that choked the bore for hours. By 1866, Roberts and his competitors were looking at something faster. Nitroglycerin, 10 times more powerful than gunpowder, cleared smoke faster, worked in wet rock where powder fizzled out, and it needed shallower holes to do the job. There was just one catch. Nitroglycerin was, by any honest measure, insane to handle. It was a pale, oily liquid that would detonate if you dropped it, shocked it, or gave it a solid knock. A spark alone wouldn't set it off, but a hard jolt would. And it began to break down at temperatures as low as 50 degrees Celsius, growing more unstable the longer it sat. That made it the worst possible cargo for a horse-drawn wagon on an unpaved road. In April 1866, San Francisco learned this firsthand. A shipment of unmarked crates arrived by steamer from New York. One was leaking. A Wells Fargo employee grabbed a hammer and chisel to open it. The explosion at 15 minutes past 1 in the afternoon leveled the Wells Fargo office, destroyed the surrounding buildings, and killed an estimated 15 people. 2 days later, 6 railroad workers died when a separate cache detonated along the Central Pacific Line in the Sierra Nevada. California banned the transport of liquid nitroglycerin in the weeks that followed. So did England after a similar disaster. But in the oil fields of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, the ban never stuck. The stuff was too useful. By 1868, nitroglycerin was the preferred explosive for well shooting, and the men who transported it became a profession unto themselves. The nitro was manufactured at small factories scattered through the oil regions. These places were called glycerin farms, and they were built as far from towns as the roads allowed, for good reason. The Ohio Torpedo Company set up its factory near Bradner, Ohio. It blew up and knocked out every window in town. They moved the factory further out. It blew up again, this time shattering windows in the neighboring town of Rising Sun. They moved it again. In the Bradford oil field of northern Pennsylvania, a woman named Mary Byron Alford ran a nitro factory that cooked 3,000 pounds of nitroglycerin a day. She lived 80 yards from the plant with her husband and daughter. One evening, the factory and her house were both obliterated. Neighbors dug the family out of the rubble. They were not seriously hurt. They rebuilt and started again. A New York newspaper called her the only woman in the world who owns and operates a dynamite factory. She didn't argue with the title. From these factories, the nitro had to reach the wells. Railroads refused to carry it at any price, so the only option was the soup wagon. A spring-mounted buckboard with a padded compartment, usually right under the driver's seat, divided into squares the size of the cans. The cans held 10 quarts each. A full 8-quart can weighed 26 pounds and sold for $8. The driver sat on top of this, alone, on roads that were, at best, rutted dirt, at worst, frozen ruts in winter or axle-deep mud in spring. The trick, if you could call it a trick, was to drive slowly, very slowly, and to pray the wagon held together. One shooter named Billy Siegel was hauling 120 quarts of nitro in Ohio in 1896 when he felt a rear wheel wobbling. He turned around and saw it about to come off. He stopped the horses, let the wagon settle into a ditch, and fixed the wheel with help from a local farm boy. The nitro did not go off. Billy Siegel lived to tell the story, which is precisely why the story survived. Here's where the story turns, from dangerous to something darker. Lieutenant Colonel Roberts didn't just invent well shooting, he patented it, and he defended that patent with the ferocity of a man who understood exactly how much money was at stake. Roberts Petroleum Torpedo Company charged between $100 and $200 per torpedo, plus a royalty of 1/15 of the increased oil production. For well owners already stretched thin by boom and bust cycles, that was extortion. But Roberts had the law on his side, and he used it. He hired Pinkerton detectives. He filed lawsuits. His company spent more than $250,000 on legal enforcement alone. He is believed to have been responsible for more civil litigation in defense of a patent than anyone in American history up to that time. The oilmen didn't just pay up, they went underground. Small operators hired rogue shooters to torpedo their wells at night using homemade nitroglycerin mixed in crude equipment. These men carried the cans over their shoulders, walked to the well in the dark, poured the liquid into the bore, dropped the Go Devil, and ran. The Pinkerton detectives watched for the telltale water geyser that shot into the sky after a successful blast. If they spotted one at night, they knew someone had been moonlighting. That's what the oil fields called it, moonlighting. The word had been kicking around since the 1880s, connected to nighttime raids in Ireland, but in the Pennsylvania oil regions, it took on a very specific meaning, carrying nitroglycerin in the dark to dodge a patent fee. Some historians think this American usage helped cement the word into everyday English. Andrew Dalrymple was one of these moonlighters. On February 5, 1873, he secretly shot a well at Dennis Run, Pennsylvania. The nitroglycerin detonated prematurely. Dalrymple and his wife were both killed. When Roberts's patents finally expired in 1883, Congress refused to renew them. The strife had been too great. Within a year, the number of well-shooting operators exploded across the oil regions, and the dangerous business of nitro transport only grew. The shooters who handled the nitro fell into two types, according to oral histories collected in the 1930s by the Federal Writers Project. Either they were reckless, devil-may-care types who got a kick out of driving the soup wagon fast, or they were calm, quiet men who treated the whole thing casually. Both types shared two things: chronic headaches from breathing the nitroglycerin fumes and short lives. Near Wapakoneta, Ohio, in January 1895, 3 men were thawing frozen nitroglycerin by dipping the cans into hot water. The cans detonated. The horses had their heads blown off. No part of the wagon was ever found. The dead were Frank McNelly, a shooter, John Pettigrew, a driller, and Frank Logan, a tool dresser who left a wife and 6 children in Arlington. And here was the cruel mathematics of the job. Nitro haulers could not buy life insurance. No company would underwrite the risk. Their families had no safety net. A man could be one bad rut in the road away from leaving his wife and children with nothing. The soup wagon kept rolling anyway. In the oil fields of Ohio alone, the Bluffton News ran nitro accident reports as regular items through the 1890s. Some were fatal. Some were near misses that read like dark comedy. In January 1897, a man named Scott Bentley hitched a ride on what he thought was an empty nitro wagon driven by a shooter called Kid LeFay. When Bentley went to step off at his front door, LeFay mentioned the wagon was carrying 180 quarts. The paper reported that Bentley's heart leapt into his mouth and did not return to its natural position for 3 hours. Even the empty cans were dangerous. Children in the oil towns knew this. They would steal them from unattended wagons and throw them into a field to watch them blow up. A thin film of nitro coating the inside of an empty can could still detonate on impact. The oil fields had a saying for it: an empty can is always loaded. You might think this all ended with dynamite. Alfred Nobel had patented it in 1867, mixing nitroglycerin with absorbent clay to make a stable stick that could be shipped by rail. And dynamite did replace liquid nitro for mining, tunneling, and construction. But not for oil wells. The shooters preferred the raw liquid. It was simpler, it fit the torpedoes better, and the results were more predictable in a deep bore. So the soup wagons kept rolling. Through the Pennsylvania fields, through Ohio, through Indiana and Kansas and Oklahoma, and eventually Texas. The Otto Koppler Torpedo Company, a successor to Roberts's original firm through a chain of sales and mergers stretching back to the 1880s, manufactured its own nitroglycerin at plants near Titusville until the last one blew up in 1978. They kept using liquid nitro from outside suppliers for another 12 years after that. The last oil well in America shot with liquid nitroglycerin was fired on May 5, 1990, by the Otto Koppler Torpedo Company in Pennsylvania. That same year, the Department of Transportation banned the hauling of liquid nitroglycerin over public roads. 124 years. From the first well on Oil Creek to a final shot in the same Pennsylvania hills. And for every one of those years, some man somewhere climbed onto a wagon or a truck, sat down above a compartment full of liquid that could erase him from the earth at any second, and drove to work. No life insurance, no monument, no pension, just the soup, the road, and whatever nerve God gave him. The next time someone tells you they're moonlighting, picking up a second shift or a weekend job, ask them if they're carrying nitroglycerin. Because in the Pennsylvania oil fields, that's what the word meant. Men hauling the most unstable explosive ever made on their backs at night to avoid paying a patent fee to a man who hired Pinkertons to hunt them down. Some jobs are hard, some jobs are thankless, and some jobs are so dangerous that the language itself remembers them long after the last man who did it is gone.